So this is bad. Really bad. I compared PCBS 1 and PCBS 2 on something that's actually important. Their selection or rather number of individual parts to choose from. Definitely make sure to watch until the end, as I've got some weird interesting stories in there from passing through some of the game's code. As I've already noted at like 4 sentences ago, you might not like what I'm gonna tell you. I've already told you in this video why PCBS 2 isn't taking the concept to the next level as the marketing wants you to believe. Some of the bugs I showed you in that video are outdated now, I know. But for one, there's still plenty of them in the game, and also there's the issue with the parts. This is why I've been compiling a sheet comparing all of the major categories of parts in both games. I've also added some of the other categories in water cooling, not everything though, as some just plain aren't that interesting. By the way, this sheet is gonna be linked down in the video description for you to look at, and I plan on updating it in the future if you're interested. Also, if you find any errors I made, please feel free to let me know. I'm only one guy, and looking at numbers for more than 100 hours compiling this list, I may have made some mistakes. Also, I put general notes on some parts with bugs or just wrong details listed. But now let's get into what I found. Looking at the CPU section, you might say, Eaz, what's your problem? There are more than a dozen of new parts in PCBS 2 and only 2 missing from the first game. And yeah, you're right. Though I still have to say I don't quite get why the 3600 XT and 3800 XT chips haven't been ported to the new installment of PCBS. It's not like it would have been that complicated, and they've done it for another XT CPU, which is why I think it's not AMD not licensing the part for the new game. Oh yeah, that's something I wanted to explain here as well. This video isn't plain hating on the devs for not including certain parts in the game, as I know for them to be here, they need to be licensed out by the manufacturer. I still want to point out some parts missing though, especially the ones where I don't believe the brand wouldn't have licensed them because they've been included only very recently in the first game and are hugely popular in general. But let's look at another category, so you get what I mean. CPU coolers. There's 131 of them in PCBS 2. 24 of them are new, which means more than 100 just got ported over from the first game. But PCBS 1 had 200 coolers in total, 93 of them not being ported over. And yeah, I get it, some of them might be outdated and brands might not want them included as they don't sell them anymore. But there's also some which I plain can't imagine why they wouldn't be here. Why would you include Radiators XPG Levante AIO as 240mm variant but not the 360 one? Or why did you include the H150i RGB Pro XT and not the H115i or H100i? Though I have to say, those tongue twisters of name scare the shit out of me. I also wanted to tell you that Cryoric as a brand doesn't appear in PCBS 2 anymore. They didn't partner for this game. Also, Gigabyte's air cooler isn't in the game anymore, as well as the one from Motoni that was meant to kind of represent the Intel stock cooler. But that's only a tiny selection of all the stuff that's been scrapped. More is shown on screen and again available in the sheet in the description. Let's jump into the mainboard section. Here we've got 138 boards, 29 of them being new, namely the C690, X670E and B650 boards, as those platforms didn't exist in PCBS 1. Yet still 37 boards from PCBS 1 didn't make it into the game. Some I'm sad about because you just don't have as many options when building systems, and some things are just plain not possible anymore on older platforms. Also, some I'm just plain confused about. Why have so many recent AIM4 boards and also C590 boards been removed when they're not even that old? That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm just baffled about some stuff that got added near the end of PCBS 1's lifecycle not being here. Why would a brand insist on the part being added into the old game, not in the sequel, but still license out some of the other stuff? And that's gonna be a theme, especially in categories such as GPUs, cases and RAM. When we're speaking of the devil, RAM is a little bit special. I've already mentioned C690 and X670E not being platforms that have been supported in the first title. So there also wasn't any support for DDR5 memory. As a conclusion, all the DDR5 RAM in the game is new, making up for most of the newly added memory. To be exact, there's 91 new parts in the category for a total of 242. Here we've got one of the examples of really much work from the first game just being unused. There's 190 parts from the first game that are unused. And Just to make it clear, different speed variants and color variants of a certain part are listed as their own part in my sheet. But this isn't anything special, that's what the developers have been doing themselves to get their numbers of parts. What I've gotta say about RAM is that first, prices got adjusted in a recent update of PCBS 2 to not go to the moon, so that's definitely now a difference to the first game. But also, some of the missing parts are just lower clock speed variants of some RAM in the game. That, on one side, makes it not that much of an issue, but still kinda sad if you wanna build like an authentic, I don't know, 6th gen system with an Intel CPU. What hurts way more is that some popular RAM options that got added kinda late in the first game haven't been ported. An example of that would be Corsair's Vengeance LPX, that here in Germany, but also in the US and other regions, is some of the most popular value RAM in general. Also, entire lineups of memory like Radiators, Spectrix D40 RGB, D41 RGB, D80 RGB, Dazzle, Gamix D10, Colorful's entire selection of memory, Corsair's Dominator Platinum RGB, Patriot's Viper Steel RGB, as well as Team Group's Excalibur and Zeus lineups have been scrapped, just to name a few. I know this is a weird place to ask this, but why can I watercool some RAM in a certain lineup, but not the entire lineup, when they all share the same in-game model, therefore requiring seemingly no additional development time? An example would be a Data XPG Flame 8GB versus not coolable 16GB model. But trust me, that's just one. There's almost no lineup of RAM where you won't find that oddness. While I'm unhappy to see this on a design stance, what's even more distressing is the removal of many SKUs of GPUs. But first, let's talk numbers again. There's 176 GPUs in the game, 28 of them being new, the other 148 being ported from PCBS 1. Yet, the first game had 272 GPUs, with almost half of them not reappearing. Some notable ones are reference models from AMD and Nvidia for the RX Vega 56, 64, RX 6800, 6800 XT and 6900 XT, as well as GeForce RTX 3060 Ti, 3070 Ti and 3080 Ti. There are even entire GPUs that have just gone poof, like the infamous GT 1030, GTX 950, 960 and R9 370, 380, 390, 390X and RX 480, as well as Vega 64 in general. Other lineups have just been obliterated, like the GTX 1060, which has one card in PCBS 2 while having 18 in PCBS 1. This is a problem, but not only for the 1060, but also the 1070, 1070 Ti, 1080, each only having one part here, while often having more than 10 in the first title. I also want to mention Zotac not being represented in PCBS 2 for newer GPUs than the 20 series, while having 12 in the 30 series in PCBS 1. While I haven't mentioned most of my other notes from the sheet here in the video, I wanted to point out that some implementation of GPUs here seems lazy. So many of the new GPUs have some missing branding in the name. For example, the PNY 3050 Revel, which of course should be GeForce RTX 3050, but of course someone forgot that. Also, there's like entire batches of GPUs where every single card is the exact same price, like someone forgot to change them up at least a little bit. Examples of that are the entire RX 470s and RX 5700s. One RX 570 also isn't listed in the app that shows GPU and CPU performance. Someone apparently missed that, and the RX 6950 XT and 7900 XTX reference cards from AMD are shown to have no lighting, which is just plain false. All of those bugs wouldn't even require someone to use them in the game to find the bug. Someone either didn't care or didn't know, which both is a really bad sign for a developer of a simulation game. There we are, another category. This time, drives. Here we again have a partner that jumped ship for PCBS 2. Seagate, which had hard drives in the first game, isn't a partner for this installment. Anyways, there's a sum of 68 drives across HDDs, SATA and M.2 SSDs, with 12 of them being new. 4 of those new parts are just some made-up hard drives to replace those from Seagate from the first game. PCBS 1 again had almost double that at 127, of which 71 didn't make it into the sequel, most of them being SATA SSDs, of which there aren't many in PCBS 2. Namely, Colorful's and Kingston's entire SATA SSD lineup has been dumped, but also Patriots and some special edition ones from Team Group, to name the notable ones. Also, many lower capacity M.2 drives got shelved, together with Corsair's MP500, which doesn't appear here at all. Another category that got slashed in half are power supplies, dropping from 128 in PCBS 1 to 72 in PCBS 2, with only 7 of them not only being a port, and only one of those being notable because it's a new brand. Of course, I'm referring to Endofree's Supremo PSU. The parts that got cut are mainly from Cooler Master with almost 30 parts, followed by Silverstone with about 10 and EVGA with a little less than that. I'm also sad to lose Corsair's TX series, which were semi-modular power supplies, being a category that now is inexistent. Now we're heading to case fans. But stop before you skip this section for being yet another "yeah, they cut it in half," because it isn't. A, it just went from 141 to 106, with 15 being new, but B, there's some interesting thing I noticed which again makes me believe someone either has 0k for the game or is just plain incompetent. Because, as you would have seen in the cases category, which we're heading to next, they ditched the Cooler Master H500P. Now, you might ask yourself, why does that even matter? Let me tell you. They removed the case, but still left in the fans that you normally only get or really need for that case. The Master Case H500P 200mm RGB fans are still here, though the case itself has been yeeted out of the game. This is also another reason for me to believe that licensing isn't really why some of the parts haven't made it to this title, but rather someone rushing out the game, carelessness, or just not knowing any better. There would have been no reason for Cooler Master to license out a fan, but not the case it should come with. I have to mention though, the fans are indeed used in the game, as they come pre-installed in the HAV 700 from Cooler Master. For me, that still isn't a good reason to include them, as in real life there's different fans used for this case, so why not include the actual ones? Yet, before we head to the cases section, there's even another bug I wanted to mention, because there again is a systemic issue that is important. The Corsair LL120 in its standard and white versions have different values for airflow, which makes no sense at all. This wasn't an issue in PCBS 1, which this part got ported from. I don't really get how this happened, but if you look through my lists, you'll see there's plenty of cases where they just ported a part from the first game, but somehow still managed to introduce bugs. Cases are a category that's just brutal. There are less than half the amount of cases in the game compared to the 334 from PCBS 1 at just 172. Some again make no sense. Why include Radiators XPG Defender Pro, but only the normal and not the white version? Same with Thermaltake's Core P5, where we only got the standard one, but are lacking the green one. Not even starting to mention Be Quiet, Silent Base, Pure Base and Dark Base cases that all still exist, but got cut combined more than 20 color or window variations. Additionally, worth to mention is a case that has been by far one of the most popular cases on the market, Corsair's 5000D Airflow and 5000X, which isn't in PCBS 2. There's literally almost no shot Corsair wouldn't have licensed this out. Oh, did I mention there's more than 15 other cases from Corsair that also didn't make it, along with around 40 from Fractal Design, with some being similar to the issue with the Be Quiet cases, but some just plain not being in the game as the Note 202. That case was hugely unique and made you able to build systems that just aren't possible in PCBS 2. NZXT 2 lost more than 40 variants of cases, some of which were uniquely designed cases that must have been a lot of effort for the person that made them for PCBS 1. I'm so sorry to see them get lost to this new entry in the series. Rygentech follows suit with about 20 cases missing, some of which also were quite unique as the Coeus and Silenos. Silverstone also lost like half of its cases. When we are already talking about Silverstone, there's yet another bug. The white version of the FT05 case is listed as having different radiator support as the standard version of the case, which of course is again straight up bullshit. Something like that also happened to Cooler Master. There's like 10 versions of the NR200P, which is a rather small form factor case. Yet the wide window version of the case lists 360mm rad support, while while all the others don't. I don't even get how no one checked for that. There should be like at least some automatic check for implementing several color versions of a case or other part that doesn't let you make such a mistake, as you've seen in the video how many times this seems to happen to the devs. There's even more of what I've just told you about in the sheet too. And remember, that's just what I've noticed while looking at each part for a few seconds when adding them to the list. I may have missed some issues, and I didn't include bugs I found in gameplay while using those parts. Yet feel free to comment down below or hit me up wherever with corrections and additions to my list, as well as wishes to what I maybe should add as well. But don't worry, we aren't done yet. I've also looked at some of the categories regarding water cooling, and there I of course got a ton of issues with the selection too. The numbers here aren't far as large, yet the implications are at least as harsh. All these 17 radiators in PCBS 2 are just ported. 7 got scrapped that have been in PCBS 1. If that were just any 7, I wouldn't be as mad as I am, but those include the only 420mm, nice, and 480mm versions of radiators in the game. This renders most of the cases with support for larger radiators unusable for custom water cooling unless you like ugly red configurations. By getting rid of these parts, they've also got rid of the strongest radiators in the game when it comes to airflow. A category we're gonna sum up fast here, but is still in the sheet, are gonna be reservoirs. Nothing's new, none got removed. Next, CPU blocks. Here there's 4 new ones, all EK velocity squared, but we lost one of the 39 that have been in PCBS 1. Here we have another naming issue, or rather bug, that wasn't apparent in PCBS 1, but way more consequences, has another bug. Let's compare the models of these 8 CPU blocks from EKWB between PCBS 1 and PCBS 2. Notice something? Yeah, they done goofed. None of those models are the right ones. All of them use the same black EK Supremacy acetal model rather than their own one. I don't know how this hasn't still been fixed after, wait, let me look, half a year of this game being released. I mean, it's not like it's hard to notice there's something wrong. But wait, there's more. All those CPU blocks are only available in free build mode, not in the story mode. So either someone has forgotten to implement them there, or they just ported all the parts from PCBS 1 and forgot to disable them in the free build mode, which also would explain the missing textures. Though I do have to say, this being still the case after that long is like a straight up FU in the face of us that bought the game. This is like even less than zero effort. I don't have any words for that. I'm not even angry anymore, but rather disappointed in the abilities of whoever worked on the game. Not to get too caught up on that, let's move to the next entry, pre-Watercooled GPUs. There's 43 of them, just like in the first game, but 3 are new, all of them being 1060s. The 3 cards that got scrapped are a 2080 Super and 2080 Ti from EVGA and a 3090 from Zotac. Just so that there also isn't any 30 series GPU from Zotac in this category either. Hate to see it. They also listed a 2080 Ti from Gigabyte as not supporting RGB, even though it clearly does. To round it out with a positive category, let's get to the mainboard blocks. I mean, they didn't exist in PCBS 1, so they at least couldn't port something over and introduce bugs. All 6 of the existing ones are new. What I noticed, but couldn't be bothered to note down in my sheet, was that the supported mainboards almost all have been written in wrong capitalization. So yeah, didn't last long until there was a bug. I didn't look at GPU blocks as they weren't in the first game, and also the issues with the names of supported GPUs compared to the mainboard blocks we just went through went up to over 9,000, which was when my sanity thought, nope, we're not gonna even try. Also, let me know if you want me to add peripherals to the sheet, though there shouldn't be anything too surprising there. Now, before I close out the video, let me tell you about the anecdote I've teased you about in the beginning. Working on this video thanks to a community member of mine in Glumboi, I've had the opportunity to look through some of the game's files. This includes files that specify all of the data for different categories of parts. Even some information that either isn't listed in the game itself or is wrong in the game and differs in part from what I've got here. I'm not a developer myself, so I don't know how much of this stuff works, but there's some more information in there that I and a lot of other people people in the PCBS community have taken issues with. For example, some cases aren't made to be used on random jobs in the story mode. This is specified in those files, as well as thermal throttle temps on GPUs and CPUs, which, as you may know, I've also taken issue with, as they often are wrong compared to the real part. This also applies to clock speeds quite often, at least with GPUs. For some reason in these files there's also always a link to the product page of the real part, with many times them just being wrong and copy-pasted. I myself at some point stopped counting when I saw links to ASUS's product page below multiple listings of pallet GPUs, or should I rather say literally all of them. Another interesting observation is, and I know this is a lot, but I wanted to share some of this stuff. Eventually the developers seem to have reused a lot of information from the first game, even in those files, not bothering to do them again. Why do I know that? There's leftovers in there from the GT1030, a GPU that isn't even in PCBS 2. Something I also can't explain myself is why the file named cases literally only includes cables, rather that was the case early on in the game's lifecycle. Also, remember when I told you that Seagate isn't a partner of the game anymore? They still didn't get rid of Seagate's name in the files. At some point I maybe should stop asking questions, cause just nothing makes sense here anyway. Also, for those that are curious for the numbers, the total number of parts excluding the custom water cooling categories are 1,249 in PCBS 2 and 1,815 for the first game. That's a solid 50% more, if I may say so. At the end, I again want to thank Glumboi from my community for helping me data mine PCBS over the course of multiple months, because it was really interesting to see the changes in the game over time, even there's still plenty of stuff that is wrong. Are you still missing something in this video? Then please leave a comment. Also feel free to like and subscribe so you won't miss any future content. If you want something to watch after this video, why don't you check out my video on everything wrong with PCBS 2 and its marketing. Also, this video got released multiple days ahead for channel members. This is a great way to support the channel and get early access content alongside a few other perks too.